Hello, Psych2Go viewers. I'm Michelle Rivas, and I'm the host of Psychology Roundtable. Our guest for today's live stream is psychiatrist and social media personality, Dr. Sasha Hamdani. Dr. Sasha's inspirational and educational content on mental health has earned her thousands of followers and millions of views across social media accounts. It's an honor to have her here today. Welcome, Dr. Sasha. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. What an intro.
Absolutely, you deserve it.
Oh my God.
So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah. So, my name is Sasha Hamdani. I was born in California, and I did my training right out of high school. I got into medical school, and I landed in the Midwest. As I was going through medical school, I started to just struggle with my own mental health in terms of ADHD and everything else that came with it, which kind of led me down the path of psychiatry. So I graduated from medical school, got into psychiatry residency, and then really niched down and just subspecialized into ADHD as like a clinical interest.
Mm-hmm.
And then in, right around the time that everybody was joining social media, like the pandemic, it was boring being at home. And so I got on to social media and started doing these small educational tidbits and some advocacy stuff online. And it's kind of grown and expanded since then across multiple platforms. And that led me to writing a book, Self-Care for People with ADHD, which was released through Simon & Schuster in January, and releasing an app, Focus Genie, which came out last week.
That's amazing. You can download in the Apple Store and the Google Store.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, we'll talk about that later. But so I just wanted to start out. I wanted you to define exactly what ADHD is, because I feel like people are still confused about it sometimes. Like they don't know exactly what it is, and sometimes people misdiagnose. So just defining what ADHD is and how is someone diagnosed with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So ADHD is a clinical diagnosis. That's like the first and foremost thing to talk about, because there are a lot of people that question the validity of that. But yes, it is. It's in the DSM. It's qualified by the CDC and NIH, and it is a diagnosable medical condition, and it's a neurodevelopmental condition, which means a lot of the times it's passed down genetically from throughout your family. So you're born with it, and it's categorized by three different things. And you don't necessarily have to have all three of them. It can be a different variation of all three, but it's inattentiveness, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. So you have those three kind of main pillars that you're dealing with. And so ADHD is broken into also three big classes, which are kind of similar to that. Inattentive type ADHD. So ADHD inattentive type, which for a long time before the name change happened in the DSM-5, it was called ADD. So a lot of people think about that distinction. So it's basically all ADHD now, but ADD is ADHD inattentive type. Then there's ADHD hyperactive type. And then there's ADHD combined type, which is kind of a combination of the two.
Yeah, and sometimes people think it's all like just one thing, right? It's just ADHD. And so with that being said, what is ADHD paralysis, and how does it interfere with a person's ability to complete tasks?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's kind of, so ADHD paralysis it's not in the DSM criteria, right? So, and when I'm saying DSM, I'm talking about the diagnostic criteria laid out in that statistical manual. So psychiatrists and therapists and anybody else who's clinically diagnosing something uses that criteria to see if you meet it in order to give you that diagnosis. So ADHD paralysis isn't in there. But basically what it is it's discussing when you have executive dysfunction. So that's an inability to start, to sustain, to complete tasks because you are feeling tremendously anxious or stressed or fatigued. So it's a breakdown in goal-directed activity. And why it's called paralysis is they literally feel stuck in that moment.
Yeah, they feel like it's like a freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And so how is it different from procrastination, though? Because some people would say, well, isn't it just the same as procrastinating?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a really good question too, because
Yeah.
I think procrastination, there is a component of it,
Mm.
a component, which can be volitional, right? Which can be
Mhm.
like, I know this is coming up. I, I'm just going to ignore it. Like, I'll deal with it
Yeah.
later. And you turf that stuff and you push it off till later. And, that can be, due to difficulty with like understanding time. It can be difficulty by being overwhelmed. It can be for a lot of different reasons, but you're conscious of that. I feel like ADHD paralysis or task paralysis or executive function breakdown, um, for the most part, I think can be is involuntary. You get to the point where you are so oversaturated with stimuli, with being overwhelmed, with being tired, with being anxious, that your brain, literally those gears are not working and you can't think about that next step because you're frozen.
Yeah, and do you think that it kinda goes together with depression and anxiety sometimes, like, comorbidly?
I think it can. I know what's
Yeah.
tricky about ADHD,
Mhm.
like clinically,
Yeah.
as a prescriber,
Yeah.
um, and someone who diagnoses this, what's
Mhm.
tricky about it is that a lot of the times when you have significant ADHD dysfunction,
Mhm.
it impacts every facet of your life. So you look anxious, you look depressed, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have that underlying. It could be that
Mhm.
that air of dysfunction is so much that it's causing symptoms that look like ADHD and depression. Although there is a high correlation, a fourth of people with ADHD also have anxiety, and almost as much have cross correlation with depression. So it's
Mhm.
just a very nuanced field. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and, like, that paralysis, it can stop people from even, like, completing tasks like basic hygiene, right? Even things
Yes.
like that, like, getting up in the morning, brushing their teeth, and so I think that sometimes it can go, hand in hand with depression or exacerbate, like, depression and anxiety. It's
Yeah.
just a vicious cycle. And then in
Yes.
terms yeah, for sure. And then in terms of, like, brain function, research shows that ADHD paralysis is caused by a dopamine imbalance in the brain. Could you explain how this works to our viewers?
Okay. Kind of.
Is
Let me
it
let me
is it
back up.
or would you disagree? Because I know it's a research and, like, maybe you don't agree with it, but do you agree that it's a dopamine imbalance or
No, so here's why I'm hesitating.
Mhm,
I think it's a complicated phenomenon because a
mhm,
lot of times people, when they're talking about this dopamine theory, there's a
mhm.
lot of it's easy to say, I don't have enough dopamine in my brain, and that's what's causing these problems.
Yeah.
When really the truth is it's not that you don't have enough dopamine. You might have perfect amounts of
Mhm.
dopamine. It's just not in the right place, or that it's being
Yep.
used up too quickly, or that it's being recirculated at a pace that's not appropriate for the situation. So that's why it becomes a little bit different. So when you're
Mhm,
looking at dopamine dysregulation theories,
mhm,
there's a lot we don't actually know exactly what it's from. We don't know if it's because it's excessive breakdown. We don't know if it's not
mhm,
being synthesized appropriately or enough quantity.
mhm,
We don't know if it's just being expressed in the wrong area.
mhm.
So it's really multifaceted. I think dopamine is a big major player in this, and I can tell that, because when you're looking at its, you know, ADHD's intercorrelation with like reward pathways and how
Yeah.
people like express that in their brain, there's a high crossover there. It also makes a lot of sense when you're thinking about certain medications that work and why they're so effective. They're partially active on that norepinephrine and dopamine pathway. So I think it is involved. I don't know exactly how it is involved.
Do you feel like in the future it'd be good if they could, like, create technology that could actually, like, show you exactly where these imbalances are?
Oh my god. I mean, I dream
That would
about that all the time. Like,
I
and when I'm
actually
saying that, I'm, like, being
yeah.
100% serious. That's where my dreams go.
I actually recently interviewed, someone a week ago. His name is Dr. Alexander Nicolescu, and he's actually creating research and developing tests on how to, like, measure anxiety and depression in blood. Like, how yeah, so I think that's amazing. Maybe ADHD is next, we'll see,
Come
but
on. Bring it
right?
on. We're
And then
ready.
right, we're ready for it. But and then sometimes people who experience ADHD paralysis, they'll just be labeled as lazy by others. How do we fight this problematic stigma? Because it is invalidating, and a lot of people feel like ashamed to come forward with ADHD because they just think they're gonna be labeled as like a lazy person or a bum, and that's not fair.
so not fair, because I feel
Yeah.
like, I don't know, I'm probably biased in this, but as someone who has ADHD, man, I feel like I work hard all the time.
Right.
I don't feel lazy. I mean, I feel,
Right.
and so I think that it is I think if we could somehow destigmatize this enough so that people understand that it's your brain is uniquely wired. So it's
Right.
not necessarily that you are lazy, it's that you have dysregulation happening. So the
Yeah.
way you attend to attention and emotion is different than what I think a neurotypical person deals with. So when you're expected to perform along the same metrics, it's easy to compare those two things, but they're two totally different brains.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think that as we're beginning to progress a little bit more and understand more and learn how to accommodate
Mhm.
different forms of neurodivergence, I think people are more ready to have these conversations. But I think that it's like this live stream, I think, is fabulous because, right, we're
Thank
getting
you.
we're getting eyes on things, and we're learning, and we're exposing and talking more about this as a phenomenon, so that more and more people recognize this as like, hey, we should be talking about this. We should be opening up ways to accommodate and change our structure so that we can get the best possible work out of these people instead of just immediately labeling them as lazy.
Absolutely. And how do you feel like the same people who make the argument about people with maybe ADHD being lazy or procrastinating, um, they would say that a lot of people, or I guess they would have that same argument that they don't take accountability for their actions, that they just want to blame the ADHD. And like, what do you have to say about that argument? Because I also feel like that's invalidating.
I would agree with you. If there's a lot around that, right? Because a lot
Mhm.
of people, they think that people are using ADHD as an excuse. And I think it's
Mhm.
really important to understand that it's not an excuse, it's an explanation, right? I'm trying
Yeah.
to explain to you how my brain is working. And for example, if we had something where I'll give you a random example. I turn in
Mhm.
something late, right?
Mm.
And then I'm like, "Ugh, God, I'm sorry. I have ADHD. It just, maybe that's not like a solid explanation. But if I'm saying I was trying to turn it in and at the last second, the last like 3 minutes before it was due, I got distracted by something else and I was unable to pull my attention away. But I had this full intention of doing that and I have been ready this entire time. There's an explanation there, like, okay, you got distracted and it's harder to turn your attention away from things that are highly stimulating. And so, like, it
Yeah.
I think gives a little bit more grace and understanding because there is a lot to be said when you're just looking at people who are not ready to hear that, right? They're not ready to
Yeah.
hear about ADHD because they think that this was a purposeful omission or that there was the intent of being late or that you didn't prioritize this task when really you might have been prioritizing it the whole time and this like
Exactly.
at the last second slipped through your fingers.
Yeah, and, like, I mean, in a situation like that, you can prove, "Well, I did the assignment," but and just because I feel like that's why teachers need to be more understanding of that, but that's why you're seeing in universities, they have, like, accommodations now for, like, mental
Yeah.
health issues, so that's good. So, I mean, I agree with that, but yeah, a lot of people would say, like, "Oh, well, it's not holding people accountable." I guess there is a limit though, right? There is a limit to where someone can't just say, "Well, it's my ADHD." There has to be a point where it's like, "Okay, well, I have to take responsibility for not doing something or completing a test." How
Of
do you feel about that?
course.
Yeah.
Of course. I think that there
Yeah.
is it's I don't even think it's a fine line. I think what needs to happen is that with ADHD, you need to understand, hey, here are my limitations. Here's what I'm not necessarily good
Mhm.
at, and here's what I'm great at. And learning how to balance those two things so that you can function in society is important. So if you're lucky enough to be in a situation where you're in it, like someone is accommodating of ADHD and of like these neurodivergent differences, utilize that and work with them to build an architecture that you can thrive in while still being held accountable. Like, you got to do these things to progress in society and be part of
Right.
it, but you want to have certain accommodations so that you're allowed to thrive, right? You can't just
Exactly.
get out a free card every time.
Right.
You have to put in the work and
Thrive.
find a way to thrive.
Absolutely. And so for those suffering from ADHD paralysis, what coping strategies or treatment options do you recommend? I know it's different for every person, but like generally speaking.
I That's a really good question, and I get it all the time. And I feel like
Mhm.
my answer is different all the time. But the one thing that stays stable is,
Stable.
I think that the most important thing, when you are trying to find ways to cope with that, is to
Mhm.
understand what your patterns are. And so if you understand your own behavior, and if you're like, this is how much eating impacts me, this is how much drinking impacts me, this is how much sleeping impacts me, this is how much exercise impacts me, this is when I typically feel anxious, this is when I
Mhm.
typically feel depressed. That those data points are so helpful, especially for this ADHD paralysis, because then once you understand your patterns, number one, you can hopefully avoid those periods of ADHD paralysis a little
Mhm.
bit better, because you're not getting so overwhelmed and sucked up in that moment.
Mhm.
And then number two, you recognize your patterns enough to know how to climb out of it. And I think that's what's really important. So everybody has its slightly different answer. I'll tell you, in my case,
Mhm.
just a week ago, this is good
Mhm.
timing. A week ago, I was in that spot where I was just absolutely overwhelmed with too many things. And I explained it like, my brain is too full. Like, nothing is coming in, nothing is coming out, but I understand my expectations of what I'm supposed to
I
do. I
saw
just
that video and it was so relatable and inspiring. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. But
Mhm.
it was like, I really struggled whether or not to post that, because I, first of all, like, crying on the internet.
Well,
I
your
don't.
followers love you because you're honest and transparent. That's, like, what it is. Because I think that I'm sorry to interject, but I think when people see
No.
you, they see this, like, accomplished psychiatrist, this doctor. It's intimidating, right? And people can't always relate to that, but you're being human, and people can relate to that, and they love it, and that's why they follow you. They don't follow you because, "Oh, you're a psychiatrist." They follow you because you're Sasha, and they think that you're relatable, and you are relatable, and you're amazing. So, yeah.
Oh, come on. But the
Yeah.
video itself, I think it came from a place of just like, I mean, just getting smoked on every front. And so I
Yeah.
just I mean, it really, Michelle, it took me 3 days to come out of that, like 3 solid days where I was out. And I felt like that was a time where I had all that pressure to do all these things. My app was launching. I had a lot of family
A
stuff and
lot.
personal
Yeah.
stuff going on. Work was like a lot. I have a lot of patients in a small amount of time. And so it was so difficult for me in that 3 days to kind of figure out, because I'm like, I need to be functional right now. And
Yeah.
my brain was like, no, thank you. So I think it's just a matter of like, when I got into that spot, I recognized like, okay, I know that my needs are this, and I don't have much to give. What do I need to prioritize so this will be over in the fastest way possible? And what I needed to prioritize, I needed to get calories in, I needed to get adequate sleep, and I needed to, like, exercise off the table. No way. It's like, I know it's probably good for me, but that, and my body was just
You're
not
like,
having it.
"No."
I can't,
Yeah.
like, no. And then I needed to hydrate. I mean, I was like, I was like running 1,000 miles an hour. I didn't have a sip of water in like 3 days because I was just like all over the place.
Oh my god, see, self-care is important. You have to, like, breathe and, like, think about yourself for a second.
And it's just like, you get so consumed by other things that you just like, you forget all of these important things. And so, like, that's what I prioritized. And one of the things that's on that Focus Genie app, which literally was created because I was in one of those holes at the time, is
Mhm.
they have a focus tracker where you can track, like, this is how much water I drank, this is how much I ate, this is how much I slept, this is how impulsive I was, this is what my mood was.
So
So
you
then
can, like, realize it, yeah.
I went back, and I didn't think about the water thing until I went back and I was
That's
looking,
scary.
and I had tracked my thing, and I was like, no, I
Oh my
really
god,
haven't been
that's
drinking a lot of
scary.
water. So
Like, you
it
could
was nice to
yeah.
be able to go back and be like, okay, well, at least I can better identify my patterns
Mhm.
this way.
Absolutely. And like, was it therapeutic to talk about it on camera? Like a release?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, I think I was so there's some posts where I'm, like, really excited to see what people would say, and there's some posts where I'm, like, too fragile of a spot to, like, really pick up
Yeah.
and process, and I think I was in that spot where I'm like, "I can't even." So, like, I
Mhm.
filmed it, I made the decision to post it, I was like, "I'll come back to it in an hour if I wanna take it down," and so I didn't really, like, think about it or look at it for actually, and then I waited a little bit longer because I forgot about it.
Yeah.
And then later, I saw those messages, and they were so wonderful and supportive and kind,
Yeah.
but I don't
No
know.
trolls? I mean, maybe 1 or
I haven't
2,
seen
but
them. I haven't seen them, and I hope I never do.
Okay, no, I mean, that's good though, because there are a lot of internet trolls. I get why you'd be kinda hesitant, like, I don't know.
Oh my god, my channel is so nice. Everybody on literally everybody on there, it's like a support group. They're so wonderful. Like, I'm getting to the spot where I'm getting to recognize names on there, and it feels very I don't know, very inclusive and great. And sometimes, like, even when I need reminders of stuff, I'll go back through the comment section. I'm like, "Ooh, that's a good idea." Like,
Who does that remind me of? Our audience here at Psych to Go is supportive, amazing, and lovely. Just a thank you to you guys.
yeah,
So that brings me to our audience segment where we answer your viewer questions. I'm super excited about this. Are you ready, Sasha?
of course.
Awesome. Before we get to that, I just wanted to say, guys, we have our new book out at Barnes and
Ooh,
Nobles and Amazon, The Psychology of People by Thomas King. If you guys can see it, you guys can get it now. It came out on the 19th. It's one of Amazon's top releases. Please support us. There's a link in the description. We also have our Barnes and Nobles book and coffee event coming up. So just look out for that link in the description. So let's get started, Sasha, Dr.
yeah.
Sasha.
I respond to anything.
Awesome. So let's see. We have a lot of people in here. So let's see what they're saying. So let's see. Okay. Teresa asked, how do I tell my parents that I think I have ADHD? I'm 25 years old, but I'm afraid that they'll ostracize me for my mental health issues.
Yeah. I mean,
That's a good question. Thank you,
that's a
Teresa.
that's a really good question. And it's a tricky thing, whether it's ADHD or anything else, right? Anything else in that mental health sphere. It's always it's always tricky to know the right way to disclose that. And a lot of the time it really depends on who your family is and what your dynamics are and things like that. What I've found personally, and I mean, I think this is just from being both a provider and a patient, I've found that, like, from a personal perspective, like, if I keep things as clinical as possible, it really it takes away, like, the emotional component of it, which I think people, when they talk about mental health, it's hard to separate those two. But if you're saying things like, I went through and I was talking with a therapist and I looked into, and we were talking a lot about how difficult it was for me to focus and name certain things and the emotional side of things, and you really get into, like, clinical data. Maybe people would be more receptive to that, and there'd be less of that air of judgment. You can also, like, have your parents go in with you to, like, a therapy or a diagnostic session and have
Mhm.
the therapist do that for you, therapist or psychiatrist or somebody.
Dr. Sasha, you've mentioned that you have ADHD. How did your parents like embrace it?
My story was weird. So I got diagnosed in 4th grade, and I it got picked up. It wasn't really talked about at the time, but it got picked up because I presented as really hyperactive. And so
Mhm.
I was, like, wreaking havoc in my classroom. And so, like, when they got, when my teachers talked to them and they got kind of pushed along pediatrician and things like that, at that point they were like, okay, I get it, I see it. And so they we I was started on medication, but we didn't really talk about it because it wasn't talked about a lot. And then I was on medication and I didn't actually realize I had ADHD or that I was taking medication for ADHD specifically. I thought it was, like, just a vitamin that's going to help me. until I got to med school. And then that's when we really had conversations about it.
Wow. And they embraced it though, or were they didn't know, like, what it was at first?
I think they knew what it was. They just didn't know how to broach it with me being in 4th grade. And we've talked about it since then, and I think they would have done things differently now. But when I was in medical school and trying to figure it out, I think they handled it really well because they gave me a safe place to explore it on my own. Because initially I was like, there's no way. And I rebelled against the diagnosis and I fell behind in school, and it was just really difficult for me. And then they were like, just come home and let's, instead of focusing on school, just focus on ADHD, really get into it. And so we were going into the library, we were going and researching on our own. We were talking amongst each other and trying to make a game plan and understand the brain a little bit better. And that safe place, that week-long exploration into ADHD and having that safe place to answer questions and to explore this, I think was really wonderful.
Absolutely. Sometimes people just need to be educated on these things. It's not that a lot of people sometimes they're not trying to be cruel or rude about mental health issues. They just don't know. And
Yeah.
so it's good to educate people. That's what we're trying to do at Psych2Go. That's what Dr. Sasha is doing. And so next question is by Style Fairy. Hopefully I'm not butchering your name. So Dr. Sasha, how does ADHD link to social anxiety in general?
That's a good question. I think that, like we talked about earlier in this live, some of it is that you get some anxiety from ADHD when ADHD isn't properly managed, and some of it is you can have anxiety as a completely separate problem. Anxiety can sometimes cause focus issues that look like ADHD. So it can be that this is anxiety with focus issues. It can be focus issues that cause anxiety, or it could be a combination of both. Really, one of the biggest questions I ask patients when we're trying to figure that out is, do you feel like we'll do it from the anxiety perspective. Do you feel like your anxiety is caused by your inability to focus? Or do you feel like your inability do you feel like your anxiety is caused by, I have to do it the other way around because I'm talking about focus usually. So when I'm talking about ADHD and trying to figure out if it's from anxiety, is your lack of focus causing anxiety? Or is your anxiety causing a lack of focus? So that way you can kind of figure out, and if it's like, I don't know, man, it's entirely possible that it could be both.
Mm-hmm. So it could be one or the other, but it's just crazy how, like, sometimes people don't even realize they actually have anxiety and depression and ADHD, and so they're not getting the help that they need sometimes.
Totally.
Yeah. And so then Selena asked, my boyfriend says that my ADHD behavior and laziness is unattractive and a turnoff. How do I deal with this? And how do I explain to him that I'm not doing it on purpose? He sounds kind of toxic, Selena.
I don't like him. Here's the deal. I think that if we're being as judgment neutral, because like when that falls on my ears, I hate it. But I think if I'm being as neutral as possible, it really boils down to the fact of like ADHD is something that most of the time you're born with and like you work to cope with and handle on a regular basis. And so this is going to be an ongoing thing that you support and manage. And so with finding a partner or partners, or finding people that you allow into your life, you want to find people that are going to support and cherish you throughout this process, because it's a long process of trying to figure out all those variables. So I think explaining it to him and explaining it clinically, and how this isn't a failure. It's not a moral failure. It's not something that you're purposefully doing. This is just your brain works a little bit differently. That could go two ways. One, it could be like, totally understand where you're coming from. I can't believe I didn't think about it this way. How can I support you? Primo, that's a good response. If you get, I don't really believe that. I don't know if that's true. I think you're just lazy.
Yeah, that's unsupportive.
It's not that it's unsupportive. I mean, yes, it is totally unsupportive, but it's also indicating that, you're doing your due diligence and you're explaining to him kind of how your brain works. And if you're not getting like at least a listening ear or willing to kind of explore this together, that
Yeah.
might not change.
And I think that paying attention to language is important because using the words laziness, procrastination, it's not approaching the situation with empathy or compassion. And so if someone's just going to throw out like mean words, then that's definitely not going to help the situation. So I'm sorry about that, Selena.
Or that it's a turnoff. Come on, Selena.
You're not a turn off. And
I'll
then
introduce you to someone else. It'll be fine.
right. And then I love this next question because it kind of goes with the last one. Allison Romero asks, how or in what way can you support your partner who has ADHD? I love that. Thank
I
you,
love
Allison.
that question.
Love that question.
So number one is first understanding how your partner's brain works, asking questions coming from a neutral and non-judgmental place, like providing them a safe place that they can talk to you about it and you can work on solutions together. I mean, I will tell you from personal experience, this is what I think my partner does really well because I know he does not have ADHD. His brain works like just very analytically and like we just think completely differently. And there are things that I know probably just irritate him to no end in the way that my brain works and vice versa. But the way that we have managed or have figured out how to get past that is through communication. Like we have just kind of figured out how to communicate those things to each other lovingly without, I mean, it took us a second, but like without confrontation or without it being offensive to the other person. So once you kind of figure out how to talk to your partner, and once you guys are both coming from a place where it's supportive and you're working to build together, I think that's really powerful and wonderful.
And opening that dialogue, communication is everything, right?
Totally.
Yeah. And then let's see. Oh, and then just so that you can clarify this again, because you did mention this, but some people maybe came to the live late. Lollipop the robot asked, is ADHD paralysis a part of ADHD, or is it a different diagnosis?
It's not actually part of the formal diagnostic criteria. So it's something that we kind of colloquially talk about, and it's something that we just it's like a conversational term for discussing um executive dysfunction. Like this is a problem. We need to address this a little bit more carefully because I feel very frozen and stuck. That's what that ADHD paralysis side of things is, but it's not part of that diagnostic criteria. But to be totally honest with you, I think the diagnostic criteria for ADHD is pretty narrow and kind of stupid. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. So maybe it will be. I don't know.
They said that if you don't get, I've heard this before, that if you don't get diagnosed as a child with ADHD, that you can't get diagnosed as an adult. Is that true, or how does it work?
So no, that's not true. I mean, you can get diagnosed kind of at any time, but what I would say is that you would have had to show symptoms as a child. So even if you weren't diagnosed, because there are a lot of people that didn't have access to care or were running around untreated, or their parents didn't want to go and get them evaluated, and they didn't carry that diagnosis, but they had symptoms. So I think I would have had to present before age 12, but you don't necessarily have had to have had a diagnosis. That's crazy.
Yeah, no, that's insane.
Yeah.
Because and what's the difference between ADHD and ADD?
So there is none. So ADHD is what they call all of it now. ADD is kind of an outdated term, and it's most akin to ADHD inattentive type.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't even know that. Thank you for clarifying that.
Mhm.
And then this last question, and I think it's just interesting because sometimes people don't know what the causes are behind ADHD. But Rachel Miranda asked, "What is the root cause of ADHD?" Obviously, there's not just one, but
No, there isn't just one. I mean, fundamentally, this is neurodevelopmental. It gets passed on through families. It's a genetic thing. There is a lot of other things that they're looking at, like perinatal factors and other things. Some people have seen an association with head trauma. But for the most part, that's one of the biggest components. There is some, there's an entirely separate school of thought where they're looking at like trauma focus and how that's related to ADHD, but it's still theoretical and not proven. I mean, the trauma definitely doesn't help ADHD. Does it cause ADHD? I think it's a separate thing.
Thank you for that, Dr. Sasha. And that concludes our audience section. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. So now we're going to move over to the last segment of our interview. And I just wanted to talk about Focus Genie. Could you explain that to our viewers? It's an app that you can download on Apple, the Google Store, available on iPhone, Android, correct?
Yeah.
Perfect. And it gives people like the tools, people with ADHD, the tools to sort of like understand their behavior and to also help them navigate what they're struggling with.
It's so much better than that.
Explain it to us. What is Focus Genie?
It's so much better. So Focus Genie is something that I worked on. I've been working on it for about 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And it is basically the place to start. Like if you think you have ADHD or if you have a loved one with ADHD, because it's got two parts. It's got an educational side and it's got a functional productivity side. So the educational side is like these little, it's like social media swipe throughs, and it's broken down by like areas. So there's like relationship stuff, there's professional stuff, there's physical stuff, there's fundamentals, and there are little tiny educational modules that you with key points and polls. And so it's engaging, that you can learn from. And every month there are new ones being added. And then on the other side, there's productivity tools. So there's things that you can break down your tasks. There's to-do lists that you can break down by category. There's a focus tracker where you can track, your food, your water, your sleep, your mood, your impulsivity. All of that stuff gets tracked, and it's visually kind of depicted into insights. So you see your patterns over time. You can body double with people if you feel like you need someone to help you. There's ADHD focused audio. There's a journaling section. So all of those things together working to kind of help support the person. And then on top of all of that, it's gamified. So it's engaging, you're earning coins, you're motivated to keep going. So I just felt like I was trying to think about like, what is something that I really would have used in medical school when I was struggling, and to keep me on track, to get me through schooling so I could understand my own brain from like a neutral spot. Because with the pandemic, I understood how difficult care was to access. And with social media and things like that, I love it because I can give information, but it's so disorganized. It's hard to like give you like, if someone wants to look for something, it's hard to find all of this information about that. It's just scattered and you're kind of at the will of the algorithm. So this is just nice that it's all in one spot.
So it's like a go-to it's not just for ADHD, right? Though, but like for anyone dealing with like mental health struggles.
So it's the educational parts talk about ADHD pretty specifically, but I think the productivity tools can be used for anything. And as we're getting more and more feedback, we've had patients that they're not even formal patients, but we've had people that are suffering from anxiety and struggling from depression that have really benefited from all of it. So it's just a nice asset.
So it's like a go-to kind of like a tool that you can use when you're struggling. I have it right here. This is what it looks like, guys, if you can see it right here. It's available for download on like what you said on the Apple Store, in the Apple Store, Android. It's free, like you said, and it's super easy. Like it downloaded.
It's free to download. It's free to download. There's a 3-day free trial. There's a subscription model after that, but it's if you wanted to pay per year, it's $4 per month. And then if it's by month, it's $6 a month, because I wanted to make it less than a cup of coffee per month.
Well, try out that free trial. It's worth a try, right?
Yeah, if you hate it, stop it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Sasha. It was amazing. And thank you for all you're doing, expanding education around mental health. We really appreciate you. And thank you to our amazing viewers for participating today. And remember to pick up our new book, Psychology of People, on Amazon and Barnes & Noble's, link in the description. Have a great day, guys. Bye.